California's homelessness crisis is a homegrown problem. An estimated 221,530 people are homeless in California, the largest homeless population of any state in the U.S. and 30% of the nation's total, even though California has just 12% of the population. Researchers believe the way the state measures homelessness, though important, represents an undercount because cities and counties tallying their homeless populations in just one day miss people who may be hidden and living in their cars, for instance. The idea that homeless people are rushing into California is just not true, said Margot Kushel, a physician who treats homeless people and the lead investigator of the study for the UC San Francisco Benioff Homelessness and Housing Initiative. Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom and state health officials are steering initiatives that include a 2024 ballot measure to expand treatment for mental health and addiction, including building more residential treatment facilities. Newsom is also leading a new program under the Community Assistance, Recovery and Empowerment Act, known as Care Courts, to move people into court-ordered treatment. And the administration is seeking to add rent payments as a health care benefit available to low-income Californians. Kushel said the findings point to the increasing demands for adequate mental health and addiction treatment, and more low-income housing. While some people reported heightened mental health and substance use problems before becoming homeless, the trauma of being on the streets, Kushel said, can lead to, or amplify, behavioral health conditions, including drug use and depression. A staggering 82% of people experiencing homelessness said they had a mental health condition or substance use challenge in their lifetime. And 66% said they were currently experiencing mental health problems, such as depression, anxiety, hallucinations, or trouble remembering things. Sage Johnson was homeless in Los Angeles and lived for years in shelters before getting into low-income housing. Despite working graveyard shifts at Walgreens and other minimum wage jobs at the time, she said, she couldn't find anything affordable and experienced heightened depression and anxiety while homeless. Being out there unmedicated, without therapy, you spiral out of control, Johnson said, who was among the formerly homeless who helped guide the research. The report also found the median length of homelessness was 22 months. In the 6 months before becoming homeless, people had earned a median monthly income of $960. Of California's adult homeless population, 75% became homeless in their county of residence. Nearly 40% reported being homeless for the first time. Roughly 1 in 5 became homeless after leaving an institution such as jail. Most people, 78%, reported spending the most time homeless in the prior 6 months in unsheltered settings, 21% in a vehicle, 57% without a vehicle. Before experiencing homelessness, 32% had a mortgage or rental lease agreement, roughly 50% did not. The homeless population is aging. 47% of all adults surveyed were 50 or older. And Black and Native Americans are disproportionately homeless. For example, just 6% of the state's population is Black, yet 26% of homeless people surveyed identified as Black. The findings show the limits of California's unprecedented spending to combat its homelessness crisis. Newsom's administration has poured more than $20 billion into the crisis since he took office in 2019, much of that distributed to local governments to provide services and build housing. Why homelessness crisis in California worsens despite states spending billions to fight it. California has spent a stunning $17.5 billion trying to combat homelessness over just 4 years. But, in the same time frame, from 2018 to 2022, the state's homeless population actually grew. Half of all Americans living outside on the streets, federal data shows, live in California. The problem would be so much worse, absent these interventions, Jason Elliott, senior advisor on homelessness to Governor Gavin Newsom, told CNN. And that's not what people want to hear. I get it, we get it. But with $17.5 billion, the state could, theoretically, have just paid the rent for every unhoused person in California for those 4 years, even at the state's high home costs. The admittedly reductive math would leave nearly $4 billion for services like mental health treatment. But even if California did want to pay rent for every homeless person, there just isn't enough affordable housing to go around. We need 2.5 million more units in California, said Elliott. This is a problem that is decades and decades in the making because of policy choices that we've made. We are not blameless. And when I say we, I mean Republicans and Democrats alike. A total of $20.6 billion has been allocated through 2024 to combat homelessness. Nearly $4 billion went to local governments to spend on anti-homelessness initiatives. $3.7 billion went to a program called Project Homekey, which also funds local governments, but specifically to buy properties like motels and commercial buildings to turn into permanent affordable housing. So far 13,500 units have been finished. It's not enough, said Elliott. But reversing the slide is the first step to creating an increase. A further $2 billion from the huge pot went toward tax credits for developers to build affordable housing, which has seen 481 new units completed so far, with thousands more anticipated. Another $2 billion went to kickstart affordable housing projects, stalled by funding shortfalls, and nearly $2 billion was spent on emergency rental assistance. Politicians, and many voters want solutions. Newsom devoted his entire State of the State speech in 2020 to the issue. In a recent poll, 84% of Californians said they think homelessness is a very serious problem. In Los Angeles, the issue dominated last year's mayoral race, with the winner Karen Bass declaring a state of emergency on homelessness on her very first day in office. Kushel's report dispelled some myths. Number 1, that many people on the street don't want a home. Not true, says Kushel. Participants overwhelmingly wanted permanent housing, she concludes in the report. Number 2, that many people on the streets of California are not from California. There's a widely held belief that many people become homeless elsewhere, and come to California for the weather and the more liberal approach to homelessness. And therefore, California does not owe them anything. Not true, says Kushel. Myth number 3. That mental illness is the driving force behind homelessness. Yes, 66% of respondents did report symptoms of mental health conditions currently, which is the statistic quoted by Elliott, the governor's advisor, to argue a solution is more complicated than just writing rent checks. But Kushel questioned if mental health problems led to homelessness, or the other way round. Most of that, half of people, had severe depression or severe anxiety. Not surprising if you were experiencing homelessness, she said. Still, tackling mental health issues among the unhoused is a major plank in the Newsom administration's effort. We're taking a new approach, he said last spring when unveiling his mental health plan, rather than reforming in the margins a system that is foundationally and fundamentally broken. Part of the new approach is, controversially, to effectively force some people into mental health help, allowing relatives, social services or medical personnel to refer people to be considered for a court-ordered treatment program. Just tackling the mental health side can't solve the problem, says Kushel. Not when the median rent is $2,200 for a 2-bedroom apartment. Which brings us back to the need for 2.5 million more homes. The state does have a plan to build them all by 2030. But here in California, like elsewhere, housing and zoning decisions are down to local governments. We've got communities in this state that are refusing to build low-income housing, Elliott, the governor's advisor, told CNN. Because they say it's all just rapists and child molesters. So that's the dynamic that we're facing, right? The state is suing a number of wealthier cities for thwarting the construction of affordable housing within their borders. There aren't enough affordable houses in California, therefore rents are too high. So, how much money would people need to make up the shortfall and stay in their homes? One of the surprising things was how optimistic people were that relatively small amounts of money would have prevented their homelessness, Kushel said of the people surveyed. For a lot of them, that $300 or $500 a month would do the trick. The Newsom administration is spending more to combat homelessness than this state ever has before. Prior to 2018 there was no coherent statewide plan or funding structure. But, they say, the state needs help. The federal government needs to get in the game and do what it used to do, which is provide housing as a guarantee, said Elliott. He says for every 4 Americans in need of a housing voucher, there is just 1 voucher available.